It's 420 somewhere, and right now that somewhere is right here. Welcome to the Cannabist Show. I am definitely not producer Vince, but I'm guessing you knew that already. I am your host, Ricardo Baca. My buddy and producer, Vince Chandler, is still out this week with an injury. Vince, heal up soon. Brother, come back as soon as you can. Seriously, Vince, I miss your musk. Now, I want to say thank you to our loyal viewers and listeners. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for subscribing to the podcast and watching the TV show on thecannabist.co. Thank you. It has certainly been an interesting week in the world of weed news, especially when you consider all of those fake news sites and non-journalistic websites out there publishing outright lies and nonsense. Now, you know the feeling. You read the headline on Twitter, Facebook, and wonder, that cannot be true. Oh my God, if this is true, it's huge news. And then you click on the story and read it, and you see that some of those telltale signs of all that made-up nonsense masquerading as legitimate news. You have the crappy writing, the unnamed sources, the unrealistic quotes, the unfamiliar website name, the slightly altered but familiar URL. So for those of you who keep clicking on these fake stories, here's some fact-checking for you. So number one, no Kentucky Fried Chicken locations in Colorado are not selling marijuana. Number two, that federal study that claimed to pay you $3,000 a week to pay you to smoke weed, it's fake, and it always was. Number three, Bill Maher did openly smoke weed on the set of his HBO show Real Time, but he wasn't fined $1.7 million by the Federal Communications Commission. So if you clicked on any of those stories, you contributed to this nonsense. So please, friends, let's hold ourselves to a higher standard in the cannabis journalism that we choose to support. And I'm here to make a promise to you too, that anything and everything that goes live on the Cannabist has been vetted, edited, and double-checked by professional journalists. And while we have never been suckered by the fake news stories that fill other weed websites, we will sometimes alert you to the BS that is out there fooling people. And all of those Snopes-like stories can be found at thecannabist.co/tag/fake-news. Now, as always, thank you for reading and trusting The Cannabist. And don't forget to bookmark us, thecannabist.co, and subscribe to our twice-a-week newsletter. It's right there on this right side of the site when you pull it up. And right now, it is time to hop into the week in weed. And we are starting out right here in Colorado, where a very important and telling study was released this week. So the Colorado Health Department calls this annual study the Healthy Kids Colorado Survey. And the 2015 study tells us that the rate of Colorado teens using marijuana has not increased since recreational cannabis was legalized in 2012 and since those sales first started in 2014. Activists on both sides of the issue are manipulating the data to suit their own purposes, of course. But Larry Wolk, he's the doctor who heads up the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. He told us, quote, "I'm heartened, as I think many folks are, by the results," end quote. He also added that the survey results, quote, "reassure us, at least for the time being, that there is no increase in youth use," end quote. It's early. But the Healthy Kids Colorado survey backs up the results of another comprehensive report released in December of 2015 by the federal level Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. And that federal government report said that teens' monthly marijuana use did not increase in 2014 in either Colorado or Washington. And those are the states, of course, where legal pot sales began in 2014. Again, it's still early, but here's why this is huge news. All of you remember when this conversation first started. It first started about legalizing marijuana medically and then moving to recreationally. And a familiar refrain was, what about the kids? We've all heard that. And to be truthful, it's a very legitimate concern. This had never been done anywhere in the world. And here we are, we were the first to implement these sales in Colorado, and to finally see this data coming in at a state level, at a federal level, that shows no increase in youth use in those first few years. That's astounding, and it answers a very, very big question that many people have had about the unintended consequences of legalizing cannabis in America or elsewhere. But elsewhere in the weekend weed, country music legend Willie Nelson is now hiring employees to run his marijuana company, Willie's Reserve. For now, the company is only hiring in the great state of Colorado, but sure enough, they're looking for a production manager, an extractor, a compliance officer, and a couple other positions. Representatives from Willie's Reserve expect the brand to launch later this year in Colorado, and right now we're curious to see if there will be standalone Willie's Reserve stores or if their products will be sold in other unrelated stores. Let's throw briefly to this interview that journalist Dan Rather did with Willie, where the songwriter talks about his vision for creating a cannabis brand.
Well, tell me about Willie's Reserve.
Well, comes out, I think, in March when we'll be rolling. But we are trying to grow the best, different strains of this, that, whatever. There's, a lot of different kinds, strengths of pot. So we want to try to regulate it, make it all worthwhile and in someone's budget where they can afford it. There's a bunch of gals up in Colorado that started, that are running Willie's Reserve. We call them the high women. But it's like women's growers, I think is their legal name, but they're doing great work. And I visited a facility up there where it was bigger than a football field, where it showed marijuana being grown from the seed, and it was quite amazing to watch all that, to see how it progressed over it. And they're showing the ways to grow it, and I think Colorado probably has realized that there's a lot of money there, and a lot of other states are looking at the bottom line. So
you're talking about the tax money that comes from it.
Yeah, I mean, those guys have got to see that. You got to see what Colorado is doing and how much taxes that's bringing into them.
Right. Well, Willie, why lend your name to this? I mean, you don't need the money, so why are you doing it?
Oh, prove a point, I think. So, I felt like that if you really believe in something, why not promote it?
Of course, Willie was referencing networking organization Women Grow right there, not the high women or women's growers, in talking about the people who are helping him build the company from the ground up. Now, enough of this. Let's get some other folks out here on the stage with me. Our first guest this week, one of the largest, he owns one of the largest businesses in legal marijuana, and that's LivWell Enlightened Health. It's my pleasure to welcome John Lord to the Cannabist Show. Hey, man.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, Ricardo.
Thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
I've come over your grow and your offices a couple times.
You certainly have.
It's only fair that you come over and hang with us.
I like the carpet. I like what you've done with the place.
I know.
It's looking good.
The red shag, right?
Yep.
Well,
looking
it's
good.
a pleasure to have you. It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
John, we ask everybody this, so where are you at? Indica or sativa?
Indica.
Oh, yeah, okay.
A little sleeping issue every now and then. Nothing like it.
Sure, right?
Yep. Ambien, it beats the hang out of.
That's very true. Oh my gosh, I wish my mom has similar issues, and I've been experimenting with different kinds of edibles to help her sleep. Haven't quite found the right one, so I might have to ask you for some advice after this. So, John, I want to start with something that I've heard a lot. It's talked about a lot around town, and that's the base price for an ounce of cannabis at LivWell, and that is $99 a recreational ounce at LivWell. I looked up another random shop, one of the downtown shops. Their ounces vary between 160 and 240. Yeah. How can you afford to sell an ounce of weed for $99?
Well, some of it is marketing in the respect that, of course, we do have $99 available all day. And a lot of other stores, be they in cannabis or be they in other product lines, have an entry-level door-opening price.
Sure. Bottom shelf kind of stuff.
Once you come into the store, we run the gamut in pricing, and top shelf can be as high as $300 or $400 an ounce, and several stops in between. And there's always the little upsell situation.
Sure.
And so we encourage an upsell. Try the edibles. Try some Snoop Dogg. It's all there. If somebody wants the 99 and cut loose and go, that's fine too. But
sure.
We find that it's a good entry-level marketing tool. It's a very good, consistent product. It represents very, very good value for money.
Gets people through the door.
Yes, it certainly does.
Is it profitable, or is that more of a loss leader for you?
It's not a loss leader. It is profitable at that.
Sure.
Yes.
Impressive. And I've been inside your cultivation, and it's so massive that makes sense. You're growing a lot of weed out there.
Yeah, we grow a lot of weed.
Well, speaking of promotions, I want to talk about over Memorial Day week. LivWell sold some of its high CBD ounces to veterans and service members for a penny per ounce, which is a little bit better than that $99 per ounce price. But you basically ended up selling more than 8,000 of these ounces at that price.
Yes.
Over the course of a week. It's basically giving away almost $1 million in marijuana, and that's at that $99 an ounce price. Yep. So why this cause in particular? Why veterans and service members?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about allowing veterans access to high CBD cannabis products.
Lots of talk.
Yeah, lots of talk. Not a lot of do in cases. And we felt that it would be a very good way to bring a little bit of focus. The conversation since has been incredible. The reaction was incredible. I've got cards on my filing cabinet back at my office that would make you cry reading them. And,
wow.
and one in particular I remember was from a veteran, and it was the best deal that he'd ever received since coming out of the service, and so, for one, it was to us an incredibly worthy cause, and that's all there is to it, and although I am a U.S. citizen now, hailing from New Zealand. The U.S. military is in such high regard, go back to WW2 and what was, we were absolutely screwed without the Americans in the South Pacific, okay? End of subject. So the whole thing is near and dear to my heart. It's a give back. It's a community give back. And we felt that veterans were a non-polarizing give-back situation and worthy cause, but it also promoted awareness that this product is so suitable for those circumstances.
And you're right, it's a give back, but it also has such a legitimate tie-in to current events in terms of veterans asking for access, asking to not be punished for testing positive for marijuana if they choose that kind of treatment with their doctors over perhaps opioids or something else. But also, we live in a state that does not recognize PTSD as a qualifying condition for medical marijuana, whereas many other medical states do. Is that something that you're passionate about, the PTSD issue?
Yes, I visited several of our dispensaries during the promotion. Ricardo, they looked like hospital wards, with the waiting patients. It was incredible. Really, really worthy situations receiving the product. you know, it was humbling, you know. It really was, and I think that this sort of thing does bring focus to the whole cause. Be the situation, you know, be it psychological trauma or be it physical trauma. It was all represented.
Sure. Well, I'm disappointed that I was out of town when you did this, because I saw the press release when I came back in town. I was like, oh, that's a story I would have loved to write, but I'm thrilled that we at least have this opportunity to talk about it.
Well, I thank you for that opportunity too.
Let's switch the topic a little bit and talk about a very controversial issue these days, and that is THC caps. And this is how voters might be considering a ballot initiative in Colorado this fall that would severely limit cannabis's potency, and it would make illegal many edibles and most vape pens, and I believe all concentrates and extracts. So, John, I know you're passionate about this issue.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about this proposal that's being put out there?
LivWell is extremely concerned, of course, and so too should the rest of the industry. We've been gathering at the moment a lot of information along with our industry peers, and we will revisit this subject shortly, because this is not a LivWell fight. This is an industry fight. And the messaging should come from the industry. So we will visit this again shortly.
And you're going to visit with us again shortly, right? We're going to be talking about this sometime soon. All right, when you're ready to talk about it.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, I understand that. Jumping to another fun subject, let's talk about 280E. And I'm guessing most of our listeners, most of our viewers aren't familiar with this specific IRS tax code. So I'm going to ask you to explain it to them, John. But also, I know that many in the cannabis industry feel that it's very unfair to them. So tell us about the 280E. Why is it unfair to cannabis? And also, why should consumers care that it's unfair to the industry that they're purchasing these products from?
Sure. Actually, unfortunately, I am very, very familiar with 280E.
All too familiar, I imagine.
I am all too familiar. So I'm more than happy to explain this to the audience. So in a normal business, well, I suppose outside of the industry,
traditional business,
you're making some widgets. You have a couple of stores in town. You're selling the donuts or whatever it happens to be. And okay, the issue is that in that business, of course, it cost you, let's just say you sold $1 million worth of donuts at gross. That's your sales. Now you've got your costs. So you get to deduct all of your costs off that $1 million. So that's your lease, that's your staff, the cleaning, the this, that, the other, all the things that sort of went on to make it work, your advertising.
Sure.
Yeah. And all of that sort of thing. So let's just say after all of that was deducted, your gross before tax was $200,000, just to give it a number. That's what you're going to pay tax on. Let's do the same thing with cannabis. You sold $1 million worth of cannabis. You're taxed on $1 million. Get used to it, honey.
And there just aren't those deductions for legal marijuana businesses.
Effectively, that other business is taxed at about 35%. Cannabis is taxed at probably close to 80 cents on the dollar in a true tax situation. What that is a situation where the public perception, everybody's making $1 million by Friday, and it simply isn't the case. We're glorified tax collectors.
Sure. Yeah.
I think my company has been under almost continuous audit in one form or another for the last 2 or 3 years. It's just
by the IRS.
Yeah, be it state, be it federal,
sure.
It's just never ending.
Sounds like a blast.
It's just
no
awesome.
wonder you're so familiar with 280E.
we give them their very own cubicle, and
just go ahead and move in. Here's a sleeping bag.
Yeah, it's and okay, so that's what the industry is faced with at the moment. We're not alone in this. The entire industry and my peers have spoken of the similar sort of situation. So, you know, it's been, well, it's a game of attrition. There's no doubt about it.
And you know, so what's the potential fix to this? I mean, 280E is kind of a leftover. It's a remnant, right, from maybe the Capone era and gangsters, and now it's harming these businesses doing their best to operate legally in this space. Yeah.
It was put in there for drug dealers, you know, to declare their ill-gotten gains. And okay, here we are in of course, a state-regulated system. And okay, we would like to be treated as you know, a regular business in the regard of being able to make those tax deductions. And the fix, unfortunately, is a federal IRS fix. And the only true fix to that is, I think, going to be federal legalization in some form or another.
Wow. And so federal legalization is very different than just simple rescheduling. Yeah. This is something that's in the distant.
Don't use that word.
Rescheduling?
Don't use that word.
That's what the DEA is working.
Dangerous word.
We'll have you back to talk about rescheduling versus descheduling.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, DEA is supposedly making some sort of a decision here in the next couple
I'm
months.
not holding my breath.
Yeah. And I can't imagine you're holding your breath about the IRS making a change.
No, I'm not doing that either. And at the moment, you know, I'm just collecting the taxes and taking it to the IRS.
You're doing good work, glorified tax collector. Well, John, I'm thrilled to have you on the couch. We're going to talk with you a little bit more here in a few minutes.
Wonderful.
Right. Nice to see you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ricardo.
Now on to our next segment. Let's jump over there where we are joined by our friend, Professor Pat, for this week's entry in the new Cannabist lexicon.
Rig. The term for the glass pipes used for smoking concentrates, also called oil rig. As opposed to having a bowl for smoking flowers, these pipes utilize a nail or some type of other device which can be heated to a high enough temperature that the concentrate vaporizes. Rigs almost always utilize water for cooling because the smoke coming off the nail is entirely too hot for a dry hit. I prefer my rig over yours. The second water chamber helps the smoke stay cool in my lungs.
All right, thank you for that, Professor Pat. Now, our next guest is one of the leaders in the bustling space of cannabis security. He's the Chief Compliance and Operations Officer at Blueline Protection Group. Let's get him on out here. Ricky Bennett to the Cannabist Show. Hey, Ricky.
Hey, Ricardo. How are you?
Hey, good, man. How are you doing? My pleasure.
John, how are you? Good to see you.
And you guys know each other already. It's always so fun when that happens.
We certainly do.
We do. We've known each other for a few years now and have worked together.
So LivWell is a client of Blueline.
That's correct.
Oh,
they are.
Very cool. Well, I look forward to this conversation. This will be great.
Very
Ricky,
good.
you heard the question earlier.
Right.
Are you an indica man or a sativa man or neither?
Very interesting question. I don't think I've been asked that in 30 years, but I would answer only with neither.
Oh, yeah, okay.
In our industry, you know, we have to be somewhat careful because of what we do. So
Sure.
It's just one of our rules to work in our industry.
And you're specifically the security space of cannabis.
Right, security and compliance, absolutely.
Oh, sure, that makes sense. It's also interesting, though, too, because you have all these businesses getting into marijuana, including the Denver Post. We still drug test new employees, even if they're coming to work specifically for me at the Cannabist. So it's an interesting line to walk, right?
Always, absolutely, sure.
Ricky, let's start with some news from this week, some very sad news. Former U.S. Marine Travis Mason was killed while pulling a security guard shift last weekend at a pot shop in Aurora. You used to be the police chief in Aurora, and I know Blueline released a statement right after this happened, but could this aspiring police officer's death, could it have been avoided? Let's talk about that.
Well, I guess, first of all, the way that I want to answer that is I heard John talk a little bit about prior military or law enforcement. We hire most all of our hirees are from that same branch or that field. And when you look at it from a standpoint of not only is he military, but he was a young father.
Yeah.
You know, it's just devastating and a travesty, you know, for that family. Could it have been prevented? Possibly. Yeah, you know, I guess I would say that. I mean, I've dealt with these issues over many years, and unfortunately, they happen, right? But I think with some different security, maybe some different training. And when I say different security, maybe some different door buzzers or just methods or procedures that you could sit down and go over step by step. So possibly it could have been, but I can't tell you, you know, 100% that such a travesty could ever have been prevented.
So when something like that happens in this community, I mean, it's still a relatively small community. Is it felt industry-wide throughout the state, even beyond the state?
Well, I think obviously it is, you know, because what's impacted, of course, are our families. And in this case, and all of our employees have families also. So they're concerned. I've taken a lot of calls from wives and girlfriends concerned about their employees. And yeah, it truly is. We've had conversations with many of the other security firms, and this is one of those things, even though we may be a competitor, we're going to come together and we're going to try to work together to ensure that legal businesses like John's are properly protected and we're still there to serve.
Well, you know, so much of the conversation surrounding Travis Mason's death, you know, is would it have happened if this weren't an industry that dealt primarily in cash with a very valuable product that, you know, fill a bag full of, you know, marijuana product, maybe of all concentrates, that could be a very valuable bag when you walk out of that business if you're robbing them. So, you know, this issue of banking and the lack of banking in the cannabis industry, as well as it being primarily a cash business, we've been hearing about that for years. Is that still an issue from a security perspective? Also, is it as much of an issue now as it was a year ago, 2 years ago?
Oh, those are great questions. I guess I would tell you that yes. I mean, when you look at it, or I guess my terminology from a security standpoint is, when it is a cash business, and sometimes the product, as you were referring to, may be more valuable than the cash itself.
Sure.
So you have two assets that can be a target for the criminal element. But the issue of it being a cash-laden business, of course, that creates all sorts of problems from the standpoint of where do you move it from the store, how do you get it into the system, how do you pay your employees? There are a myriad of issues. But to answer your question, what we've seen over the last couple of years is that there are more and more pioneers, much probably like John Lord, just coming into the industry.
Sure.
There are pioneers in the financial institutions who are stepping out and are saying these are legitimate businesses. The law has legalized the businesses. Therefore, we're going to try and provide the financial support via banking and so forth.
And you're talking about some of the banks, credit unions that have gone out on those limbs
absolutely.
Quietly and given these businesses.
And I think they still want to remain quiet because we talked about the difference between the state law and the federal law. But there are those pioneers, and they're looking at it of serving the industry because, after all, it is a legal business.
So it's not as much of an issue now as it was 2 years ago.
Well, I don't want to say that it's lessened dramatically, but what I will say is it is lessening, I think, each and every day, and as we move along. So we're able to work with our business partners and also with those financial institutions to ensure that they're protected, those assets are protected, and hopefully we can assist some of those legitimate businesses into obtaining a financial institution that is acceptable.
Sure. One thing I just thought of that I've always wanted to ask somebody in your field, I mean, you're a former police officer. As you mentioned, you work with former police officers and former sheriffs, former military. How is it for you in particular, and maybe if you can share some of your colleagues' perspectives as well, that'd be great, but to once have enforced a law where you're specifically going after an illegal substance, and now that substance is legal, and now you're working to protect that substance and the people selling that, is there a conflict at all? Is it ever confusing, or is it just kind of a fun development in a crazy lifetime of change?
Yeah, Ricardo, thank you for asking that, because yes, as you mentioned, I worked in law enforcement for over 30 years. So coming into the industry with a business background academically, I wanted to get into the business, or the private business, to see what it was like. But yes, I did have a real ethical dilemma that went on, because truly I was responsible for taking the liberties of some individuals,
sure,
right, because of their involvement with illicit or illegal drugs at the time. But I had a very good friend, and we sat and we chatted about it, and he ended up saying, and he pointed out, he said, Rick, you took an oath to protect the laws and the citizens of the state of Colorado. And I said, well, that's true, I did. And he said, it's no different now, because now it's legal. And I said, you have a great point there. And I started thinking about it. And then when I started looking at the industry, of course, I just want to talk a little bit about LivWell and John Lord. And I started seeing very sophisticated and very decent business owners who were involved. And then that's when I made the leap. I said, I can do this because I think there are good people. The law legitimizes the business or the industry. So I worked through that ethical dilemma, and that's how I ended up at Blueline.
Ah, sure.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that with us.
No, thank you.
I also want to ask you another question, because I've heard from multiple people in the cannabis security space that there's a lot of criminal activity that never makes it to the media, that never makes it to Facebook or whatever. So what are some of these things that we haven't heard of yet, the things that are happening out there that are either crazy or unfortunate? What are these things?
Well, I think you have a couple of different issues. Truly, what we're seeing more and more is not these terrible incidents that we've heard about this past week, but target-rich environments. Right? They're still controlled, and a cannabis grow, for example, the product is very valuable, as you know. So I think what you're seeing, and what a lot of law enforcement is seeing, is a lot of nighttime burglaries.
Sure.
Those types of issues, and they're losing product and so forth. But those are things that we can go in and assist them with different security measures. Truly, just a stronger door or something different, where we can stop that. Albeit, sometimes there are some silly issues, and that is, if you don't have a sophisticated business person or owner, and sometimes we've seen some younger folks involved in the industry, and they become very impressed with the amount of money that they're earning at the time. So
and they're throwing it on Instagram or something, or
well,
what?
We're throwing it on the bed. We're taking selfies,
yeah, sure.
and now we're posting it.
I'm sure you've done that weekly, right, John?
Oh, just
daily.
Just roll around in it.
And so that's creating, just that target for the criminal element. So those are probably the things that you don't hear about, because they're kind of kept under the pages. They're not that big of a deal. It's a loss, a large loss, obviously, for the business owner, but you're not going to hear about that every day in the news media.
Yeah, I can't imagine it would be very smart if you're making any kind of money to flaunt it like that on a social platform that other people have access to. So.
Right. Never ever, in my opinion.
I do want to bring John back into the conversation and keep this talk going about security. I think it's especially fascinating. Last week's show, we had another representative from a different cannabis security company, and I think it was just really enlightening. So I think we need a lot more people from your industry on this couch to have these conversations. But John, let's start with you. Let's talk about what Colorado did that was right and wrong in terms of writing these regulations around cannabis security. So maybe looking ahead to other states that are going to soon be writing their own regulations, what would you recommend to them? Maybe they adopt from Colorado's method, and maybe something that they could lose because perhaps it's too restrictive, or perhaps it's not working, or whatever.
there was a vast amount that Colorado got right, and you've got to remember that Colorado was the first. So it was sort of a sight unseen regulation, and now other states are getting the benefit of where Colorado has been, and we've personally hosted out-of-state tours, etc., etc. So they're there to sort of learn, and they usually go back home and do the exact opposite anyway. So it's sort of like, you know,
so true.
Why did I even host that? You know? But you know, that's, I suppose, the story of mankind. But you know, really, Colorado was capable of. We did a hell of a lot at an early stage of things that I felt was so good. Some of the things with medical that got, you know, in hindsight, written into statute that is now more difficult to change would be some of the more negative now, whereas most of rec, you know, is legislated upon. So we can, you know, as various iterations, it can evolve.
And you're talking about security specifically, so some of the impositions on those medical cultivations or shops, maybe they're a little bit outdated. Is there one in particular that you feel is unnecessary? Well, one that we had, you know, up until, you know, very, very recently that just seemed to take a huge amount. For example, trim. So our infused products facility is in our grow. Under rec, the trim could travel just straight up the stairs and into the infused product facility, okay? Medical had to go through the medical store. So the medical trim belonging to that particular license had to travel to perhaps Cortez, where it was checked into the computer at the retail store or the medical store in Cortez. Then we drove it 8 hours back again and up the stairs and into the infused products. So and then back eventually to the store? Yeah, and then once we'd then processed it, back again 8 hours. Oh, wow. To the store. Is it still like that? So that one was one that we did manage eventually to get changed, but very, very slow process. But again, certain things that just weren't contemplated, you know, in early times, and that was just sort of a bizarre little one. But generally, you know, I would advocate things being written in such a way that as people's perception and understanding of the business itself evolves, the regulation can evolve with it. Sure. You know, there's just as much security surrounding a plant that's 4 inches high and of no commercial value to anything as there is, you know, a coarse finished bud. And okay, you know, perhaps the spotlight should be on where the value is, and not so much on a plant this high that has actually no physical, no THC, nothing, no value. I like that you're one that other states could learn from because we did it wrong, is also kind of one that, like, we eventually got it right thanks to conversation between regulators and industry. And that's been an important part. You know, the MED to a large part have tried very, very hard to work with the industry. And, you know, although it never happens at the speed we'd like it to happen, of course, that's bureaucracy, and, you know, we've all got to live with that. But there has been this steady interaction between the two and progress. And so that's a really positive thing. I dig it. Ricky, what about you? One thing regarding cannabis security regulations you like and would hope other states adopt, and one thing you don't like?
Sure. I was thinking about in the beginning when you were talking about the last statistics that have come out regarding children and so forth. Sure. I think truly in my mind that's probably been regulating and ensuring that children are out and following those laws, particularly for us from a compliance standpoint. But those statistics, I think, are marvelous. What I found interesting, and I was thinking back to in 1981. Sure. I was enrolled in a high school as a police officer, as an undercover police officer.
Oh, cool.
And
Wow.
I went through a whole semester now after graduating from college, and I had several questions after that whole program, and they were asking about kids. Well, how are the kids getting, and what's going on? And what I found out was that the majority of the kids truly didn't have the money to purchase these types of things. Now, they knew maybe where it was coming from and so forth, but they truly weren't as involved as I think everyone thought. It was truly outside sources. So I think when I heard those statistics today, I was very much relieved again, because I thought it's just what I remembered telling everybody is, don't have to worry so much about the kids. They're really making good decisions. So I've liked that part of the med rule, that they look at it and they know that it's something we should be enforcing.
And you're talking about some of the making edibles recognizable outside of their packaging, or something else?
Well, that too, but then also just allowing youngsters access, if you will, to any form of cannabis. But of course, I think probably with the edibles and so forth, we've got to ensure that we keep that away also, until they're of legal age and can make their decisions on that. So I guess I do like that. On the other hand, I would say one of the bad aspects that I've seen is, but I don't know how the med could have known particularly, and that's the transportation issue of, John highlighted one of the areas or the concerns, but we do have certain hours that we can transport, and our whole goal when we're doing a transport, of course, is to allow the business owners to focus on their business, right? Let us take away those worries that you have. And when we're trying to move around the state, we have a mountainous region and so forth, and I can tell you sometimes it's really a hard push to be able to, within those timelines and hours that med demands, to be able to do the deliveries. And then of course we have business owners screaming, can you get that here on time? Can you or can you not? And so we do our best. But
we've talked about this on the show before, but give us a little bit more on that. So what are those times that product has to be delivered during?
Right. Well, sometimes it can be, there's a little difference on the med side as well as the recreational side. So many times in the beginning we were thinking, okay, geez, this is going to be wonderful. If we're going to deliver across the state, our employees were saying, we'd rather get up early. We can get to the grow or to the facility, and we can get across state, and we'll avoid some of the traffic and other potential issues, correct? Right?
Correct.
As you know, but of course we can't begin until 8 o'clock. So that was part of the rule, right? And, and so, John, when our employees found that out, it's like, oh my goodness, we're going to be in the middle of traffic, and it's going to take us longer. And then, of course, when you have inclement weather in our state, that's always a concern. These aren't a travesty, a big deal. What I've found, though, is that the med is being, like John said, they're evolving, because we're able to go back and at least speak with them, and they're listening, and we're explaining our plight and how we're serving the industry and what we can do better. We think that is more safe and to keep cannabis out of the hands of those that shouldn't have it.
Sure. Well, that's good to hear. And, we had a show about 5-6 weeks ago where on this couch we had current MED Director Barek and former MED Director Koski. It was a great show. I encourage you guys both to check it out. Had some great conversations, and encourage our readers to check it out as well, and viewers. I appreciate you guys sharing that. Interesting things. I'm so glad to be learning more about this aspect of the cannabis industry, because security is such a big part of it, especially as the conversation now develops toward courier services and the new license recently created by the med, and what direction that's going to go, especially when you're trying to get something to John's store in Cortez, which is a long way away. What is that, 7-8 hours?
Yes, it is. Oh
man, well, gentlemen, it is time for the pot quiz. So, here is where I test you on your current events in the cannabis space. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
It was going so well up until now.
Yes.
John, we're starting with you.
Oh, thank you.
And if John gets the answer wrong, Ricky, you can steal it for the point, and vice versa. So, kind of a tough quiz this week, but we'll go for it. You guys are tough cookies. I know you got this. John, name one of the 2 U.S. congressmen who have opposing views on legal marijuana, but teamed up this week on a bill that would make it much easier for scientists to conduct research into the medical uses of cannabis. And they are sponsoring the bill.
Okay. Rohenbacher?
You can just name one of the 2. So whichever one you feel more confident with, throw it out.
Okay, I'll put that out there.
Rohrbacher. No.
Oh.
But actually, maybe I have to go check on this because maybe he is one of the sponsors. I know
He's in there usually.
I know he is usually in there. There might be some familiar names in this one. We're going with no right now, but I will double check that. And Ricky, for the steal, do you have an idea? One of the 2 names opposing views.
I guess that I don't right now. I glossed over that article today, and it's such a great question, but. Thank God somebody's moving in that direction.
Yeah, anyway. well, the news of it is that Earl Blumenauer from Oregon, who's also usually attached to these kinds of bills, and Andy Harris from Maryland, who is best known perhaps as being one of legal marijuana's biggest enemies in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perhaps one of the people who prevented sales from happening in D.C., you know. So interesting to see those 2 guys working, but they both want to know more about marijuana, which is great because we need to, and it's truly unfortunate that we don't already at this point. So no points, but we're moving over to Ricky. This is your question. Pro-legalization advocates in what U.S. state recently collected 117,000 signatures to get medical marijuana on that state's ballot?
Was it Ohio?
That's a good guess, but they actually just legalized it.
They legalized it, didn't they?
Yeah. Kasich just signed it into law 2 weeks ago, I believe.
He did.
John, for the steal. You know it's not Ohio, so what other U.S. state is it, do you think?
Actually, we were in Ohio a little while ago, so I was a little bit more up on that one just through the fact that we were there. California.
Well, you know, they've had medical. They're the oldest medical state in the market. So this would be Arkansas.
Oh, right.
Interesting.
Can you imagine if Arkansas legalized medical marijuana? That would be pretty amazing.
Right.
Yeah, that would
Interesting.
I think we're starting to see these conversations, you know, whether it's CBD happening in Texas, and suddenly, you know, 2 major players falling just in the last 6 months, Pennsylvania and Ohio. Big states, very big populations.
So much talk in so many states now, it's actually hard to keep track of it all. It is. You know, we employ 1 person within our company just for that purpose of trying to keep track.
Oh wow!
Of those states that are coming on.
Because I no longer can. You know, it's happening that quickly.
Oh yeah, it's amazing, and you know, even as much as they try, I know a lot of people use the resources put out there by Marijuana Policy Project and Normal, and they do a good job. But I think it's moving so fast that sometimes I go to their site, and even that's a little bit outdated. So
yes, true, it's that quick.
These last 2 questions are from that Healthy Kids Colorado survey that I was talking about earlier, with the good news about teen marijuana use. So, starting with John, this is from the Healthy Kids Colorado survey. 62% of Colorado middle and high school students say they have A, never used marijuana, B, used marijuana at least once in the last year, C, tried marijuana once.
I'll go for never used.
Correct answer, yeah. 62%. Middle and high school students in Colorado have never used marijuana. That's another encouraging statistic, I think, especially when you know, people's worst fears were put out there.
Yeah.
What would happen? But
and exactly that. You know, well, I've personally been involved in the industry for 7 years now, and quite frankly, you know, the wheels have not fallen off the bus. And
Right.
you know, I recall dramatically in my early 20s when Australia and New Zealand legalized prostitution. Okay, could take a little while here, but anyway, of course, it was all of that. It was, women were going to be victims, etc., and all that went on. The reality was, several years later, violent crime against women dropped some 70% thereabouts. It was not like 1 or 2%. It was this vast change. So all the naysaying kind of went out the window. Very interesting, and sort of a social, again, a social experiment, but it still exists today.
Sure.
And so, it's just been incredibly interesting in this 7 years to watch that, Colorado, the wheels never fell off the bus. It's not some crazy place thing going on, anything else like that. And now it's being normalized, I think, in discussion, which is healthy. I think it's normalized in family discussion.
Right.
I have some friends with younger children, and it's normalized in their conversation now about, cannabis and so what was under the rug and perhaps never talked about before around the dinner table now is, and that's really healthy, be it alcohol, be it drugs, be it whatever, to have those conversations with your children. And so I think that in actual fact it's brought it more because it's in the news every second day. Thank you, Ricardo. Okay.
Hey, we do what we can.
And it's really helping around, I think, normalizing the conversation, healthy, respectful conversations on the subject, or with parents, etc. And I think that actually helps, as opposed to, oh no, we can't talk about that stuff.
It makes a world of difference. I mean, my entire marijuana education as a child was coming from programs like DARE or Just Say No. And granted, that was enough to keep me away from drugs for a while. But then once I recognized how much I had been lied to by these organizations, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, now let's have some real talk about what this is, and that we live in this kind of unprecedented information age where parents can just have some straight out real talk with their children, with their small children, and just let them know that this is not for you, not now. And
I think to some extent that normalization, coming from New Zealand, we had different liquor laws, and legally you can sit there at a restaurant and pour your child a touch of a bubbly or whatever alcohol, and so it's more of a European style situation. Once my son knew that there was a beer in the fridge, he didn't want the beer, he'd rather have the Coke. It was just, it took away the illicit nature of the product. And I'm not advocating that with cannabis, but what I'm saying is that once something is kind of normalized and the illicit nature of it is removed, a child usually he gravitates the other way. So with my sons, it was like, if there's a beer in the fridge, I don't want it now. I'd rather go get the Coke.
Sure. And it'll be fascinating because these early statistics that we're talking about from this Healthy Kids Colorado survey, they're very important. At the same time, it's a year or two in, and we really need those 10-year figures to really see the impact of this.
What the trends are going to be.
I really hope it's a legitimate trend of steady, if not down. I mean, that's what I think everybody would like to see for teen use.
And we're starting to see it, so that's awesome. And it just shows that Colorado society was mature enough to handle this decision.
Right.
That's what it means, everybody's acting in a grown up and mature fashion.
Imagine that.
I mean, who would have believed?
All right, we are going to finish this pod quiz. Going to Ricky, and here's your Healthy Kids Colorado survey question. Alcohol is the drug of choice among Colorado middle and high school students. What percentage of them said they drank within the previous month? A, 20%. B, 30, C, 40, D, 50%?
You know, I would say it's probably that 40 to 50% range. I'll say 40%.
40% C.
Yeah.
Not quite.
Right.
So
30.
throwing it over.
30.
Throwing it over to John.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Okay. Well, if he went for 40 and you said not quite, then by deduction, I'm going to have to bring it back down to 30.
There you go.
And you are right, sir. You are right. I hope I didn't give that away. I thought it could
No,
either
not
be
at
30
all.
or
No,
50.
you never gave that away at all.
Well done, gentlemen. It's been such a
Thank
treat
you.
having you both on the show. I look forward to having you both on sometime in the next year. Let's do this again, huh?
Perfect.
Oh, that's
Would love it. Yeah.
I want to say thanks to my guests, John Lord and Ricky Bennett. I am Ricardo Baca here with producers Eric and Katie and the rest of the crew. Thank you all for watching and listening. Please hit that subscribe button on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play, whatever you're listening on. Have a great day, everyone, and we will see you next week, hopefully with producer Vince back in the house. We'll see you later. Nice work, guys.
To show the sound of truth, I'm allowed to lose, I choose to win, I'm all in, I'm calling any posse you'll be raising at the end, I say it again, ain't afraid to get in, I be going for the jackpot with aces in my hand, I'm raw.